Well, welcome to everyone to this very significant roundtable between C200 and WBC. Women's History Month and women making history. And just think about the World Economic Forum saying it would take 117 years to get to gender parity. Together, we are changing that, and we're changing it faster together. So think about C200. We're nearly 40 years old. We'll be 40 years old next year. And with our big kickoff with an Atlanta conference in January, God willing, it's just making history, which you'll hear today from C200. And WBC is only 2 years old, but has 45 women organization partners that are all collaborating and around 9 action initiatives. So 2 of the most important we'll address very quickly. C200 and Catalyst and WBC co-chair our Women's CEO initiative. And I think if you remember, we did a major report October 26, 2020, that we're updating, and we're moving on the fortune side. We went back 2 years ago to 5.7% women as CEOs. As of May, we'll hit 8.6%. And together, we are tracking every announcement together between C200 Catalyst and WBC as we project 10% ahead and looking at not only Fortune, but Russell, S&P, private companies, and yes, entrepreneurs above $500 million. So just think about, as C200 leads the way in so much of what will be cited today, that relationships and partnerships and uplifting one another matter big time. So to Kimber Maderazzo, Carolyn Dolasell, and the others at C200, and to Pepperdine University, thank you for your support today. And let's just look at that. It's so important to see statement after statement, and just went back and looked at Mary Barra of General Motors today, because she said the most inclusive company in the world is her objective. And in coming years, really making it to the top. And as of today, 60% women on that board. So Anna Dutra, who chairs our WBC board initiative and so active through the years with C200, with our 11 partner organizations, and with Equilar that works with us now with C200 to look at the dramatic change in numbers from a year ago on women in boards to today. Thank you. To Pam Craig, who can't join us, there's a death in the family. We cite her 5 major boards and her major commitment. To Susan Skerritt and to Lori Marcus, joining Anna Dutra, thank you. And realize your leadership on boards, because you serve on private boards, capital boards, and we look at your public boards, but you're always advocating for one another. As Anna Dutra says, uplift and give back, and make sure that we're always nominating one another for success. So with that, it is our delight to turn this over to our friend and our partner and the chair of C200, Kimber Maderazzo. Kimber?
Thank you so much, Edie. Happy to be here today. This panel is so important because we all know how relationships matter. And we're here to talk about board seats and how women can get more board seats. And 92% of board seats are filled through networking. And we're going to talk a little bit about with our C200 sisters today on how that happens. Traditionally, men have used social networks as a means to acquire board seats. They use an in-group, out-group network, which women traditionally don't usually use. And hopefully after today, we can all feel that we need to get in that kind of mode of how do we get into an in-group network. And our ladies from C200 will share that with us. We also announced today from a collaboration on a paper, a white paper that C200 is publishing along with Equilar and Pepperdine Center of Leadership. It's about how these social networks really enhance and help prepare women for board seats. And it's something that really is going to highlight the sphere of influence and how women can have more of an influence in board seats and get those. Because I know all of you who are joining us today are really looking forward to what is the secret sauce in that. On the panel today, we have our C200 sisters, who is C200 is a peer community that's shaped with so many different women. There's about 550 women. And out of those 550 women, we have over 460 board seats. So, and counting, I should say, because a few ladies said today they even got a few more. So the number keeps it growing. And we know that's a huge number for such a small organization. And it's really through the power of the network that makes this happen. So I have some amazing women that are joining me today. So let me introduce you to them. As Edie said, Pam's not able to join us. So we wish Pam luck today. So I want to start with Susan Skerritt. So Susan Skerritt is an accomplished bank executive and corporate member with expertise in governance, human capital, regulatory, and risk management. She serves as an independent director on 3 public boards: Tanger Outlet Centers, Community Bank System, and Verret, a private Falcon group. And for nonprofit boards on Brooklyn Hospital, Hamilton College, and she also is the senior advisor to Promontory Financial Group. She serves as an independent director of Royal Bank of Canada's U.S. Bank. Prior to her transition to her portfolio career, she was chairman and CEO of president of Deutsche Bank and Trust Company Americas. Amazing background, Susan. I also welcome Lori Marcus. Lori is an experienced board director with both public and private companies. She brings experience in all aspects of consumer marketing. She serves as an independent director on 3 public boards: Go Love Corporation, which is Price Chopper Grocery, DNA Diagnostic Center, and Funware, a publicly traded company. She also serves on advisory boards for founder-led early-stage companies, and she is an executive coach to C-suite executives. Prior to her portfolio career, she is working in multiple senior marketing executive and senior companies such as PepsiCo, Keurig Green Mountain, and also Peloton. I also welcome Ana Dutra. Ana, if you know Ana, she's a Brazilian with 30 years of experience in global P&L management, corporate governance and M&A technology and business growth in over 25 countries. Ana led P&Ls with companies such as IBM, Korn Ferry, and Accenture, and helps boards and CEOs transform businesses. Ana serves as director of the CME Group, the largest fintech company in the world, and Electrobras, world's 4th largest energy renewables and 7th largest energy company. Harvest Inc., a leader in the cannabis industry, and First Internet Bank, Elclay Industries, and M. Holland, a global plastics company. Ana also chairs the Latino Corporate Directors Educational Foundation and the board initiative of Women's Business Collaborative. Ana is an avid triathlete and yoga practitioner, and she has the best-selling lessons of a book called Leadership, Detoxifying the Workplace. That is not a mistake. The name of the book is Leadership. Ladies, welcome. Thank you today for joining us. We talked a little bit about how social networks really help prepare us for board seats and really, help advancing women in business. So my first question, I'm going to ask Lori to help us with this one, is how do you build an expanded network and thinking? I know you described it as a really kind of an ecosystem. Yeah. So can you share with us how you did that?
Yeah, so I think, it's interesting when people come to me, I think that they are waiting for some sort of like a board fairy godmother to come down and they're going to do one thing and it's going to be a straight line and they're going to join NACD or join this or join that, and then magically everything will unfold for them. And I do think of it as more of an ecosystem. And I think that, you know, when I look at the ecosystem that I'm involved with professional women, you know, it's everything from WBC and C200 and Women's Forum of New York and Women Corporate Directors and Women on Boards 2020 and the Wharton Women in Leadership and Executive Forum. You know, I'm a mentor in tech accelerators. And I don't think it's just sort of dropping your hat in all these different places. I mean, you shouldn't be so overstretched that you can't, you know, volunteer and help and speak and help to run these organizations. But I do think you have to think about it as you have to plant a lot of seeds, you have to give a lot, and then at some point things start to come your way. But I would really encourage everybody on the call not to think of it as just sort of a very linear 1+1, and then magically everything will come together.
I love the fairy board mother. You know, there is not one. I mean, even when I got on my first board, I said to somebody, nobody's asking me to be on boards. And they said, no one's going to ask you.
Yeah.
You need to put yourself out there. So
Exactly.
we wish there was one. Maybe we can be fairy board mothers for people, right?
Exactly.
All right, Susan, the next question's for you. Share with us a journey on how a social network helped you with your first public board. I know you have a great story.
Thank you, Kimber, and thank you for putting this together. It is such an exciting day for all of us. Thank you, Edie. It's wonderful that we're talking about this. And I want to supplement what Lori said, because she's absolutely right. All of those organizations, and I belong to most of those as well, and those are really beneficial. But I would also say that even if you're not a member of all of those organizations, you have a network. And when I made a decision that I wanted to join boards, I actually told everyone I know. I told friends, I told family, I told people that I had worked with over my 35+ year career that this is what I was interested in. So the very first board that I got was a private board, the US subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada. And that came from an investment banker, someone who I had worked with earlier in my career. And I never would have expected that opportunity was going to come from him. Right. And all along the way, so my first public board was as a result of, believe it or not, 3 college friends who happened to know 3 members of the board of Tanger outlet stores. And more recently, Falcon Group is a private company whose board I've joined. That came from an acquaintance that I didn't know well, someone that I had lost touch with, and we were in contact, and the opportunity came along. So it is, I think Lori really describes it well. That ecosystem can be all of those organizations that you're part of, but it should be broader than that as well. It really should be everyone that you know. Be very open about your interest in doing this.
Yeah.
So Susan, do you suggest that someone actually get on the phone and start dialing and saying, hey, I'm ready?
You have to be a little more nuanced. Okay. Dialing for board members. That was fun. You know, it is natural in networking to reach out to people and to say, you know, I'd love to catch up with you, hear what you're doing, and give you an update about what I'm doing in my career. And that's a very natural conversation for any of us to have. So it's that very subtle kind of way of reaching out and starting the conversation. And then through the conversation, you say, well, I'm about to retire from full-time work and I'm interested in boards, and I'd love to talk with you about how you have done that journey. That's the other way of starting that conversation.
That's great. That's the great feedback for everybody. Anna, I know you're such a great role model, and you shared with me a story about how on a board that you're on right now, there are some women directors, and as the new incoming women come in, you're really a role model and kind of prep and prepare them, because part of this is also prepping and preparing women for boards. So tell us a little bit about how you've done that and how you continue to do that.
Absolutely. First of all, it's such a pleasure to be here, in particular, so close to International Women's Day. I feel that we keep celebrating during the entire week, right? We just find a reason to. But this story was actually my first public company board. And Lori, I did have a godmother, and I would go to her and ask as many questions and dumb questions as I wanted. But when I joined, we went out for coffee. So there was one woman only. I was the second one. And when the next woman joined, we said, you know what, let's take her to dinner. So we took her to dinner and we said, listen, this is an off the record conversation. You can ask us whatever you want. And well, the deal was whatever we say stays here too. But now this board has 5 female independent directors, plus one who is not independent. And for every one of them, every time we get a new woman in, we do this lunch or dinner, it's just getting bigger, which is awesome. And our collective experience is getting richer, but we share with each other so that as new women step in the boardroom, they can show their best game and they can walk in being able to having asked all the questions that are in the back of our minds and we don't know who to ask. So it became a tradition now. And we also do another thing, which is we go to the women's bathroom and take a picture of all of us. Because at some point it was just one. And now we can put our faces in the mirror and say, look at this. We actually have a line now.
I love that.
That's fantastic. I love that you actually do it in the women's bathroom. That's
I love that.
you talked a lot about, preparing for the board seats. I know that, let's talk a little bit about C200 itself, because I know we shared some stories earlier about how C200, the women and the network of our peer community in C200 and how these women really helped you even prepare for a board or even recommended you for a board. So, Lori, do you want to share an experience with us about how these C200 women came together and helped you?
So I think what's interesting about all these different groups that I referenced before, and again, they're just representative. They're not like, it's not like this is the magic list. I'm sure for every 5 or 6 that I mentioned, there's 5 or 6 others. But I think about these kind of incredible women, and it's probably a universal lesson, which is when you're involved in one of these networks, and a lot of these are, invitation only, is think about like who else you can bring along with you, to that network. So I was introduced to Women's Forum through someone I know through the Executive Forum. And then when I was in Women's Forum, I was at a dinner actually with Lynn Coughlin, and we were in New York City and we took a lift back to Connecticut together. And I was chatting with her, and I guess she didn't realize I was an operating executive in my background from Keurig Green Mountain. And she looked at me and she said, well, you need to join C200. And so then she said, I'm going to recommend you. I can sponsor you. She recommended me for C200. Then once I was in C200, she said, well, you need to get in a council, which is a small group. And so I just think about these people without me asking, they were able to sort of see something and then bring me along. And then, someone that I met, some of these people are probably on the call, Stephanie Shelley, who I met through Wharton Women in Leadership, invited me to be on another group called Extraordinary Women on Boards. And there's a public board actually that I'm going to join, assuming we get voted in the proxy, and it came through Extraordinary Women on Boards. And I think what I would say is, so it's a little bit, so 2 things I want to say. One is I encourage everybody to sort of jump off the diving board and embrace the fact that it's a little bit of a puzzle and you have to enjoy the adventure and know that you are going to meet, look at the women on this panel. You are going to meet some of the most inspirational people in the world along the way. So just enjoy that experience. It's going to lead where you want to go, but don't be so focused on the end that you don't enjoy how much more enriched your life is going to be from the, friendships and advice that you'll get from this group. And one specific thing I wanted to bring up as an example, because again, my theme is it's not linear. And I hope people don't mind that I'm using real names, but I want to be clear that these aren't just sort of theoretical stories. One of my first C200 council dinners, and Susan was there. One of the women in our council is a woman by the name of Joelle Frank, as in like Joel Frank, the company. So she's a legend. She's unbelievable. And we're at this small dinner. I think Edie was there as well. And, she came to the dinner and she said, again, everything's a safe zone. And she was in the middle of some, really kind of contentious client thing, like she always is. And she said, I need to debrief with this group and I need to get your advice on something. And the imposter syndrome in me is like, why does she want my advice on something? I'm an EVP from Keurig Green Mountain and Peloton, whatever, but she started this amazing company. And there it was, once you sort of get rid of that little imposter syndrome that's on your shoulder, and you're in the room where these women are. So they're relying on you, they're asking your counsel, your advice, and your opinion. But what I don't think she realized was that, I don't know, call it 30 minutes, that she was sharing the struggle that she was going through and needed some advice. That also for me was like taking a 2-week NACD course in activist investors, things like that. Like I couldn't have learned more in a textbook than I could have from sitting in that dinner, listening to her thought process, what she's going through, what she's struggling with, the different constituents. So again, my theme is it's not linear. Think of it as an ecosystem and be really open to what you're going to learn. So yeah, she didn't recommend me for a board, but what I learned that night is so valuable and will help me so many times in the future.
And there's so many stories like that, right? So many
Yeah.
stories. I know, Susan, you had a story very similar.
Yeah, well, and yes, and I want to say that I benefited from that dinner as well. It was fascinating, and every meeting that we have, whether it is the C200 Council or any gathering of C200 women, there is that kind of exchange. I had a very interesting situation. I was considering joining a board of a company that had very significant financial difficulties as a result of fraud. And I was really interested in the product and really wanted to join this company. But I thought it important that I test that with other people that I respect. And we had a conversation over a dinner, and everyone laid out the reasons why it was not a good idea to join this board. And that was really instructive, because that's what you all will find as you go on this journey, as you jump into the pool, as Lori so appropriately said. You're going to get opportunities that may not be right. They may not be right because of the state of the organization. They may not be right in terms of what you're looking for. Because when you join a board in a particular industry, let's say, and now I'm setting aside this troubled company, but in the banking industry, for instance. So I belong on a bank board. That limits other things that I can do in the financial services industry. So you have to be really thoughtful about the boards that you join. And it is a puzzle. You can't know what opportunities are going to come along, but you have to be as planful as possible as you go through this journey.
You do. I mean, not because you do get those referrals should you be taking them, right? It has to be the right fit. It really has to be the right fit. Yeah. Anna, I know that you do so much with the Latino Corporate Directors and Educational Foundation. So tell us a little bit more about how you've been advancing Latino corporate directors and women there.
So if you think about the work with Women Business Collaborative as well as LCDA, there are always two parts to it, right? One is the supply side. So it's really educating people. We don't just want to put women on boards. We want to put women on boards who are going to be great directors. And one way to do that is through education, preparation, coaching. The second is on the supply side is building a database, right? And on LCDA, both on LCDA as well as on Women Business Collaborative, we're working with Equilar, which raises awareness. We have the database, we put the women there, companies go to them and all that. On the demand side, then we do two things. And in LCDA, I think we're world-class in advocacy. And it's advocacy with legislators, regulators, proxy advisory firms, big influencers like Goldman Sachs or State Street Capital, who are becoming more vocal. And then the last is awareness, because if you look at different segments within what we call the diverse directors, the representation has traditionally and historically been so low that we need to raise awareness to that. We have been achieving incredible results with women over the last 3 months. I mean, over 3 months, very consistently, all the new board seats that have been offered have had 40% of women being elected to that. I don't think that any organization can individually claim credit for that. But when we are working together in collaboration, so it's C200, LCDA, WCD, NACD, all of them, then we can claim results. So there is the work with LCDA, and the educational foundation targets two things. It's education, but it's also building the pipeline. The problem, if we don't work on building the pipeline, we'll keep just having the same pool of women getting on board. So we need to look at women who are in roles that will make them either now or in a few years eligible to be great directors, and lift them and help to promote and educate them as well.
And I think that's the key, right? Is getting them ready and prepared for a board seat. Because when we talk about how those relationships matter, Lori, you shared with me a story about describing a woman compared to describing a man who you'd refer. Do you mind sharing that? It's so good.
You'll have to prompt me if this isn't the story, but it's so it's interesting. One of the other things that I'm doing in addition to my board work and my executive coaching is I'm writing a book with 5 other former senior women executives that I worked with at PepsiCo. Working title is Awk Working, not nearly as good as I have to say as leadership. So I like props to Anna. That is the best title I have ever heard. And you know, in it, it's kind of a practical guide for women dealing with sort of everyday sexism and the everyday slights that happen in the workforce, unconscious, that kind of keep women down. And then it's also a practical guide for leaders for how to make this happen less often and to be aware of it, and overall to improve diversity, equity, inclusion. So in that, we go through a number of different scenarios. We did a lot of research with young women as well as, you know, women more of our age group. And one of the things that we found is men have this real shorthand, and women use it too. I try not to use it anymore, but they have a real shorthand. They'll describe someone as, oh, he's a great guy, or he's a good guy. So, you know, kind of, I can't see you, but like raise your hand if you've ever heard that. And it's just really interesting. We've talked about how it's for such few words, like great guy, he's a great guy. It has a lot in it. It sort of connotes that there's some element of kind of talent and skill and presence, but also, you know, he's kind of one of us, he fits whatever. And whenever somebody says that, it's a little bit like in my advising when people say, I want to be a lifestyle brand. And I'm like, you can't say that. What do you really mean? That's just a buzzword. So same thing. So 2 things. When somebody says he's a great guy, what I now say is, I'm not familiar with that language. Can you please say what you mean by that? And not in a snotty way, but force people to sort of say, oh, he's a really talented sales executive, or he has really great P&L experience, really great leader, operating executive. It's a lazy shorthand that kind of perpetuates why we have, sort of this, he's a great guy, I know a guy, whatever. And then if you think about, just try this exercise, try saying the same thing for a woman. And I think this is what I was talking about. If I were, recommending Susan for a role, I would say, yes, I know Susan, she's smart and experienced, and she's so thoughtful and just like an incredible leader and all of this, but it just took me 4 sentences to say that. So I'm searching, I think, for the equivalent for women, but in the meantime, until I figure that language out, I'm just encouraging everybody not to use the lazy shorthand of he's a great guy or I know a great guy, because I think that it serves to not let women achieve sort of their full representation and their place in the boardroom.
I completely agree with you, Lori. And I think that our shorthand has to be credentials based, because that's what's going to catch people's attention, right?
Yes.
Listen, she is one of the best audit committee members I've ever worked with, or she has great general management experience, or M&A and all that. You have to pick the 3 or 4 things that are going to highlight that woman's background and expertise, and then lead with that. Because if we say she is a great woman, it translates into, oh, they're friends.
They're friends.
No.
They'll be chatting. They'll be chatting together.
No, our shorthand has to be much more punchy.
Anna and Lori, the other reason why great guy doesn't translate is, unfortunately, a man is more likely to say she's a great girl, because they're unfortunate, right? Guy and girl. But what I wanted to mention, someone just put in the chat, Carol Gordon just put in the chat a terrific term. She suggests that we say, she has values and integrity you will relate to.
I love that.
I love that
too. I love that. That's a great one, a really great one.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't have to describe us as she's smart, she knows P&L. We shouldn't have to describe a woman that way, right? It should be expected. If we're recommending her for that role, she has that already. She doesn't need to, we don't need to bring those credentials forward. They're already there.
I'm not sure, Kimber. I think we still do, because there's still a lot of misconception around why you're bringing that person forward. We could say the same about integrity. How would somebody dare to think I would not put forward somebody who I don't think has high integrity? But I think we still, unfortunately, I think there'll be a time when hopefully that will go without saying. But for now, I'd rather err on underscoring the competence and the capabilities rather than leaving it out for imagination. But it's just me.
No, I think the way I think about it is I always think about food, but I think about it as sort of like the cupcake. Like the cake part is sort of this, she's experienced financial executive. She could chair the audit committee. She has a great direct to consumer background, whatever the things are. And then the icing, I'm literally reading in the chat because I love what Carol Gordon said. And she has the values and integrity you will relate to. So you sort of do the and, not the or. And, just one other comment in that, because this happened to me on one of my boards where we were going to be adding another board director. And literally I was in the room, to be careful here, I was in the room and somebody said, we started to talk about who we were going to add. And literally 2 guys at once spoke up and said, I know a guy. And I wanted to do that moment like the old from Millionaire when it's like phone a friend. Like I wanted to like pause and be like, wait, you know that thing that people say, like they actually just said it. Someone just said, I know a guy. And instead of, I'm from New Jersey, so I can be a little snarky, like, and my roots, but like the sort of where I wanted to just be snarky and say, did you just say, I know a guy? Like, is it 1950? But instead, you sort of like put your snarkiness aside. I pulled out, now I live in Connecticut. So I pulled out this sort of Connecticut lady in me. And I said, like, that's excellent. I would love to meet your friends. I'm sure they're terrific. But let's just do and I don't want to get, overly bureaucratic. We can literally do it on the back of a napkin, but let's just do like a quick skills-based matrix of what we're looking for. So what skills are we looking for? What experience are we looking for? And then let's just say here today, is diversity, whether it's women, people of color, women of color, is that a nice to have or a must have? Let's just jot that down today and have a true north. And then we can figure out these folks that you're mentioning, if they meet those criteria, excellent. But I think it's a way, like I said, without being sort of like the overly bureaucratic one. That was a time where I didn't feel like snarkiness was going to be helpful, but just bringing it back to like a skills-based matrix light was able to sort of get over the whole, like, I know a guy, you know a guy, like, I'm glad you all know a guy. I'm sure he's a great guy. So anyway, I think that's another way of thinking about it.
And Lori, I think boards are becoming much more sophisticated in terms of the utility. If I look in the last 15 years, for example, 15 years ago, there was a lot of room for the utility director, right? Oh, this
Right,
person can
right.
Now boards are much more
Yeah.
specific in terms of building the skills matrix, understanding where the company is going and what kind of specific skill sets we're looking for.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I have all the searches that I've seen is we need somebody with cybersecurity or auditing experience or
Yeah.
direct-to-consumer marketing, but the skill set are becoming much more specific, which
Yeah.
makes it important for us when we recommend. I just got a call that I gave 4 names to the person, and the requirements were very specific. Need experience in this industry, in this kind of function. By the way, in those countries will be even better. And when we introduce people that check all those boxes, we become more credible and more
Yes.
powerful as well, because
Yes.
it's not just a great gal or a great guy or a great this or a great
Right.
that. I'm giving to you a candidate that checks exactly the boxes you're
Yes.
looking for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's where
Yeah.
the onus is on us, right? So
Mhm.
when we get those calls, we need to refer the right people, and that's where our network helps us. And again, Lori, with the skills matrix, if we're in the boardroom, it's the onus is on us to say, wait, let's take a look at this and make sure we get the right person here.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Kimber, you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to go back and we were talking before about how we can get more women on boards. And I want to throw out an idea. All of us, and Anna, Lori, and I have talked about this. We all spend a lot of time with people that we know would be terrific on boards, helping them, putting their names forward. I probably spend 2 or 3 hours every week doing that. But the other thing I want to suggest is that we need to make it possible for women to consider themselves a board member. So when I'm talking with more junior executives, I encourage them to take on P&L roles, to get into the path to the CEO, and to be thinking about boards that they can join. And that's not a kind of conversation that most young women have had before. So I think it's really important that we are talking at all levels of the organization about that opportunity.
And Susan, you're right on. You're right on, because I think a lot of, when you get to that CEO seat, those are what a lot of the board positions are. Nobody really thinks of a portfolio career. They're busy being a CEO and, even joining social networks at that level. I meet so many CEOs that say, I do not have time to join a social network. I cannot be involved in a leadership group. And we see it in C200 that a lot of women then decide, post their CEO career, okay, now I'm going to join a social network because this is what I want to do. And that's really too late. Really too late. You should, if someone had told me when I was young and growing up into my leadership roles, that's when you need your peer community. That's when you need your peer network. I would have really taken advantage of it. I just thought, I'm too busy. I don't have time for those types of things. And I think that's what we need to really help young women is really early on. So I think you're right on with that. Thank you.
And I'll add one more thing in terms of advice, because at least nobody gave that advice to me. which is if you think about your board career as any other career, when you are a senior manager in an organization, that's the time to join non-for-profit boards, to start to chair committees in those boards. Then you move on, maybe to advisory boards or to small private company boards, and somebody will see your work, number one. Number two, you become a better director as many more boards you have experience in, you learn things. My first board was the board. First of all, I was the president of the PTA of my children's school, which was probably one of the most extraordinary experiences. But I was on the board of the soccer team.
That's right.
And I learned so much there about do's and don'ts. So don't think about, well,
Yes.
I'm going to go from never having a board experience to trying to jump on a public company board, because there is an in between there, like in any other career. The other thing is that there's this myth now that everybody needs to serve on a corporate board. You're going to see if that's really for you, if you enjoy
Right.
that. Does that bring joy to your life? Do you feel that you're contributing? Does that enrich your life as much as you enrich that boardroom? And if the answer is no, that might not be part of your portfolio. It's not
Yeah.
a must.
That's right. That's right. Can I build on something that Anna said? And Kimber, I don't know if this was part of the panel intention or not, but the whole notion of serving on a not-for-profit board. So people ask me this all the time. They're like, "Well, does serving on a not-for-profit board get you to a corporate board, either public or private?" And I always say, like, don't. That's the wrong question to ask. The right question to ask is, does serving on a not-for-profit board, will it add value to you as a person, as an executive, as a long-term board director? And the answer, I think, is yes, yes, yes. And so I know the question wasn't asked, but I have so much passion around this. I joined a board of Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, multiple myeloma, incurable form of blood cancer, back in, I think, 2004. And I wasn't at that point, I mean, I was a vice president at Pepsi. I was, like much earlier in my career. I wasn't thinking about being a corporate board director someday. I had small kids trying to get money, make money for them to go to college someday. I wasn't thinking about that at some point I'd be in my 50s and wanting to have a portfolio career. So I did it because for a lot of reasons, but that was where I got all of my experience with doing CEO succession and sort of being on the other side of the table, when not as an executive, when I was writing the 3-year strat plan or the annual operating plan, but being on the other side. So, long-term strategy, risk management, CEO succession, all of that experience I got by being on the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation board. And it changed my life in terms of a way that I could give back while I was a very busy working mom, where I didn't have time for a lot of other things. So I can't say enough how much I think that is really appropriate for women at all stages, but especially earlier in your career, before you're thinking about corporate boards. And then just to wrap a bow on that story, it's funny, my first corporate board, DDC, DNA Diagnostic Center, it actually came, we were doing CEO succession at the MMRF. We were on a series of those pre-Zoom, but those endless calls, where there's two of you and you're waiting for the third person and you're kind of making small talk, but it's being recorded, so you can't say anything meaningful. And actually, while having small talk I'm the vice chair with the chairman of the board, we got to talking. I didn't realize he had started a private equity firm. He didn't realize that I had left Keurig and I was looking to do board work. And lo and behold, he mentioned they had just bought a company in the US and they were looking for a board director that had like retail and brand and consumer experience, but also understood healthcare. And there we were, of course, on a healthcare board together. And so it was a little bit of kismet, but had I not said, like in the small talk, had I talked about watching, I don't know what year it was, The Sopranos or The Crown or whatever, had I talked about that versus saying, no, I'm back in Connecticut now, and what I really want to do is I want to do executive coaching and join corporate boards. Had I not said that, the synapses wouldn't have come together for him and said, well, would you be interested in joining this board? It's not a huge company, we would pay you, and that was how I got, how I joined my first corporate board. So never underestimate both the power that a not-for-profit board can have in terms of building your skills, also the network that you'll have, and then you combine that with the Deepak Chopra thing of make your intentions known to the universe. It can just be very powerful.
You know,
And
I'll just
I-
add one but here, which is, and this is from a mistake I made. As you select your non-for-profit boards, let your
Yes.
passion speak. It has to be
Yes.
something that fits your purpose in life, that you're
Yes.
really excited about, because don't join a non-for-profit
Yes.
board because of the other people who are on the board,
Right.
or because somebody asked you to. Because I
Right.
did join one once because a friend asked me, and 1 year into it, I said, I just have no passion for the
Right.
cause. You deserve better than me. I can. So but when
Right.
you're doing something like the Latino Corporate Directors Association, Women in Business Collaborative, or Blessings in a Backpack, where we're feeding children who are hungry over the weekend, and
Yeah.
you're passionate about it, the best of you will come into the boardroom, and people will notice
Yeah.
that.
well, all of
Yeah.
you are definitely, purpose driven too, because when I read your bios, you all are on public boards, and then there's still some nonprofit boards in there. So definitely purpose driven. It's so important. So my last question is for all of us here on the panel is, how do we change the equation? We know we need to be intentional. We know we need to lift other women up and recommend them, but how do we be truly intentional about getting women involved in these social networks early on? I saw so many notes in the chat that many women said, why am I starting this at 50 years old? Why am I even thinking about it now? So what age range do you think that women should start thinking of being in a nonprofit board, or thinking of, like, if I want a portfolio career in my 50s, 60s, what age do you think they should start thinking about getting early on?
Kimber, I think they should start when they're in their 30s.
Great.
When I was in my 30s, I joined the Hamilton College Board. And I mentioned it was 3 college friends. It was 3 members of that board that connected
interesting.
me with the Tanger Outlet Stores Board, the first public board.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in your 30s is absolutely the right time to begin to get board experience,
Yeah.
and to be open to the opportunity to transition that into corporate boards. But Anna is absolutely right. If you're not passionate about the cause, then you are not going to do and not demonstrate what you
That's
are
right.
able to do. Same way that you need to have a passion for the work that you do, your professional
Yeah.
work. It's exactly the same.
Yeah.
So I think earlier is better.
I totally agree with Susan. And I'm thinking about my 2 older daughters. My oldest one is 25 and my middle one is 23. And they both, on the side of their work, discovered their passions, and they're serving on junior boards, on ancillary boards,
Mhm.
and they love it. They'll do those, like, by the way, it's the Peloton challenge, and raise money for the organization. And yeah, Laurie, that was a shout out. But and raise money for the organization. But there's something that we can do, because sometimes people don't know what they don't know, right?
Yeah.
And in your 20s, in your 30s, you are more likely to put your head down, and as a woman, just work like a dog to be
Yes.
noted. What we can do, in my opinion, is sometimes if we see a gem, just nudge them and say, have you thought about? Or try to bring them into one of your non-for-profit boards and try
Yeah.
to open their eyes to the possibilities. And then there's
Mhm.
another thing that is, for me, it's like, I get religion, and I hope you all do, is when we get calls that we either
Yes.
don't fit the profile, or we're conflicted, or we're just not interested. I think
Mhm.
it's a crime if you just say, I can't. I can't pursue or entertain this
That's
opportunity,
right.
and leave it at that. You've
That's right.
got to give the name of 3 or 4 women who you
Exactly.
know who would be great candidates for that. That
Yes.
for me, it's a non-negotiable. And just think about that. We have 77 plus a panelist. We have 80 women on this call. Each and
Mhm.
every one of us eventually gets a call. If we just bring 3 names to each one of those calls, we're not 80, we are 240,
Mhm.
250 right there. So that's our obligation and very pragmatic. And I believe in karma, it's going to come back to us.
That's fantastic, Anna. It's, and I applaud you for that because it's going to take all of us to refer those names. Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. And can I just amplify that a
Sure,
little bit? This is where
absolutely.
like the New Jersey comes out of me a little bit. And I think you can even be, I don't want to say pushier, but even a little bit more aggressive when you say like, here's somebody, here's 3 women, 4 women that I think would be great. And I'm going to make that introduction. Like, don't wait for them to follow up. Just say, I'm going to connect you and go ahead and make that email introduction and bring them together and talk them up, because I do think what we find is, let's call a spade, is like when people are putting people on boards, it's this total catch 22. They want someone that's experienced, but how do you get experience if you don't have experience? And it's just, it can be a little bit of kind of a black box of like, how do I enter? But if you're using, your confidence and the fact that you're kind of in the room where it happens and you're using that to pull others along, and then you actually make that connection, I think that can just be incredibly powerful.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you, all of the panelists, everybody who is attending here today. I want to, do a call to action, especially to all the WBC organizations to really strengthen the peer community of women, because I think our panel definitely today showed how important it is for women to help other women and really develop those social networks. I think we need to get more involved and keep women in the news and change those numbers like Anna had shared, 40%, that's a huge number in the recent board appointments to have 40% of them be women. And most of those are added board seats. We want to make sure that the women hold the percentage of equality in board seats. So lots of work to do. We have the white paper that C200 Equilar and the Women's Pepperdine Center of Women's Leadership will be publishing. We'll share it with everybody, but it really will give you an overview of what some amazing women have accomplished and their sphere of influence and the board seats that they hold. Edie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for hosting us today and letting us be here.
Everyone thank these participants, and just remember what was said today about planting the seeds for others. And Lori, the fairy board.
Edie is one of those, just so you know, that is Edie. She gets that title.
But, as Rochelle Campbell, head of NACD board,
Yeah.
that is her new phrase that she's going to use everywhere. Become fairy board mothers. But as you each talked about building, and Lori planting the seeds and making that puzzle, and Susan Skerritt, as you said, tell it all, but encourage all the way up to whether it's the path to the CEO or leadership. Anna, what you've done on advocacy, and all of you of supporting all the way from nonprofit boards up, but building the pipelines, as you've all said about sponsoring others, nominating 3 women, getting that language correct, and the skills matrix. I think it's extraordinary. Let us salute today that C200 announced that out of 550 members, there are over 460 board seats. And so thank you for pulling all that data together. To Anna Dutra and to us for the 11 board organizations working with WBC. As you know, 2020 on corporate board, because they surpassed the 20%, moved to 50-50, right? So that gender equity for boards, they're so active. And we've mentioned Latino corporate directors and ELC and the women corporate directors and 30% club and 30% coalition. Him for her for Reid Hoffman and those standing up as men, advocating for more women on the boards. It is just a new day. And again, Anna Dutra, thank you with Equilar as Gwen Young and our team work every month to extract that data. Again, we were 22% women joining boards, public boards a year ago. And in the last 5 months, we've averaged 40%, and we name companies and we name the women and we salute success. And there is nothing like it. It's about 25% women of color. We see that as such a priority. And we see as those sisters that we push upward. So thank you. Thank you, Lorena Fimbres, for hosting this from WBC, and to all of you. Your chat comments are really meaningful. And so to Lori, Anna, Susan, Kimber, and to each of us as a sisterhood and pulling our men in with us, we're changing the world, not only in Women's History Month, but every day.
Thank you, Edie.